I'm Caleb Kidcoy, Epic Legacy Hero Builder, and I'd like to welcome you to Living Like a Bank. Along with myself, you'll hear from other successful experts and people who are busy serving and empowering many lives. You'll see how we're showing others to become debt-free in record time as they build economic discipline while generating a bulletproof family legacy revenue stream together. We'll learn how to live and operate just like the banks do. Hey, what's going on, beautiful people? And welcome back to Business Book Club, aka Living Like a Bank podcast. As always, I am your host, Caleb Kidcoy, your alchemized slayer of mediocrity, heroic family legacy builder, and the very host of our program today. And join with me to discuss the controversial 48 Laws of Power, Mr. Chris McFarland. How are you today, brother? With the big, I could call you the big D there with that hat, right?
That's right. I'm repping for my favorite team today. I was just at camp, so
as long as that doesn't stand for big doofus, right? I think we're good.
We'll let the audience be the judge of that.
Okay, so sounds fair enough. Well, guys, we're having lots of fun here. We're back in Mr. Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. On law number 9, win through your actions, never through argument. Some good advice there, right? Any momentary triumph you think you've gained through argument is really a Pyrrhic victory. Did I pronounce that right? The resentment and ill will you stir up is stronger and lasts longer than any momentary change of opinion. It is much more powerful to get others to agree with you through your actions without saying a word. Demonstrate, do not explicate. What do you think about that, Chris? Do actions indeed speak louder than words?
Well, Caleb, you're the rock and roll expert, and I'm trying to remember the band and the song that's like, show me, don't tell me, right? I mean, like, who is that? Who is that? You know better than I do.
I'm not sure at the moment.
But anyway, it doesn't matter, but show me, don't tell me, right?
Show me, don't tell me. Okay, fair enough.
Don't tell me, right? Or in any form of sales, if anybody's ever done any kind of sales or marketing or anything, the message needs to kind of speak for itself. From what I understand of breakthrough advertising, that's what that's all about. Or I could get fairly personal. For those who don't know, I'm married to a Japanese woman, and in Japan, culturally, I was telling this to Michael the other day when I was hanging out with him, but it's just like culturally in Japan, they show love and they're loving, but they don't use the words. And I mean, I'm not talking about in English. Even in Japanese, they don't say, I love you, or the equivalent of I love you. But that's really what we're talking about. They demonstrate and they show love. They give gifts. They bring food, coffee, tea, whatever. They demonstrate and show. And that is exactly what we're talking about right here.
Well, it is. And we look at this old Roman story, and it reminds me of an old Greek word by the name of agape, which actually means love in action.
Right.
How do we demonstrate what we're trying to communicate? And this story is a little bit brutal, right? We talk about an engineer who is trying to help the Roman army gain a victory, and thought his engineering expertise would win over, and ended up costing him his life. Tell us a bit about that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, they don't give the name of this poor unnamed engineer.
They don't.
Yeah, it's
he wasn't a historic figure for his engineering genius.
Exactly, and I guess, I mean, I should just tell the story first. So it's during Roman times, and they're trying to batter down a wall. And he's from a city that's known for engineers, and he's like known as the best engineer in the city. And he has this great reputation, and he's got some not false pride, legitimate pride in what he does, and he knows what he's doing and stuff. And the Roman general has some preconceived ideas about how long the battering ram should be, like however many cubits, like let's say 7 or whatever, right? And so they send these orders to, hey, build us a battering ram that's 7 cubits long. And the engineer's like, well, what do you mean 7 cubits? It should be 5 because of this formula and yada, yada, whatever, right? And so the guys who brought in the order are like, bro, just, we know our boss. We hear you, but just do what the man said, or otherwise it might not end up so good for all of us, right? Because we're going to look bad, and it might not even end up good for you. So finally, the engineer in that moment does agree. All right. You want it 7 cubits? I'll make the damn thing 7 cubits. They go away. But the engineer's stubborn. He knows he's right, and he builds it for like 5 cubits and he sends it off.
Well, and I think his intentions were good too. And essentially he was trying to protect human life, right? I don't want you guys to lose this battle. Okay, we get it.
Exactly. He's trying to help him. He's acting, but he didn't. I guess the real point here, I don't think there's any justice in what happened to him, but there is a moral to the story that if he had in some way, and we'll get to this next, demonstrated rather than talking about what he was doing, he might have been able to persuade him.
So him getting flogged and scourged to death was not necessarily ample.
Well, that was a plot spoiler, but so we jumped ahead of me just a tiny bit there. That's okay though.
I couldn't help myself. What can I say?
Yeah, well, I mean, just filling in the blank there. So they deliver the according to the general, the too short battering ram, and the general's like, "This is too short," and the guys are like, "We told him to send the longer one, boss. We did what you said, boss. We did what you said." And then he even promised us he'd send the one you ordered. And so, it's all just this general's pride, really. But it doesn't really matter what caused it, as you already have said now.
Cat's out of the bag.
They bring him back into the camp and they let him talk as long as he wants, and he runs his mouth. And as soon as they stop talking, the general orders him to be caned and flogged to death. Ouch. Yeah. Rough day to be an engineer.
Rough day. And as you so eloquently mentioned, his name was not recorded in history. So specified here, the engineer whose name has not been recorded in history had spent his life designing masts and pillars and was respected as the finest engineer in a city that excelled in the science. He knew he was right, but the military leader thought he was right too, which brings us to a great point, right? It is simply a question. It's not simply a question of avoiding an argument with those who stand above you. We all believe we are masters in the realms of opinion and reasoning. I don't know what they're talking about there. Well, you must be careful then. Learn to demonstrate. Here's that love in action, the correctness of your ideas indirectly.
So I've got a great pop culture reference.
Okay, here we go.
Talking about here. For those who've seen Game of Thrones, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen that show. A few people have seen it.
A few people.
But in Game of Thrones, Queen Cersei is talking to Littlefinger. And Littlefinger gives one of his best speeches of the whole movie, in my opinion. He gives this brilliant, eloquent speech about what power is and yada, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And then Cersei has like 3 or 4, big dudes in armor with swords around her. And she's like, seize him. Cut his throat. Wait, stop. I changed my mind. Grab him again. Put him on his knees. Okay, let him up. That's power, she says to him.
There you go.
She demonstrated. Very few words. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is Martin Luther, not King Jr., the guy who founded Lutheranism, but Martin Luther famously said, "Preach the gospel at all times, and use words if necessary."
So preach with your actions, essentially. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I guess one last thing before we move on to the next topic, as our beloved producer, Michael, and I had a chance to get out in the sunshine and take in a professional football practice the other day. And it's not just football, but in any sport, a lot of times some leaders lead vocally, but not most of them. In my experience as a lifelong sports fan, most leaders lead by example. And not just in sports. I think that's also true in most walks of life,
Yep. As parents, that's a good role to try and fulfill, is it not? Michael, right. You're a parent.
Well, since he brought it up, no, I was going to bring up the football example. I was going to say that, I think our new coach for the team that you're proudly wearing, I think learned that in the last couple of weeks, that he made the mistake of talking about what's the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do, when he realized very quickly when he got smacked down that he needed to just shut up and let's show it on the field.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We know he has the goods. We know he knows how to do it. He needs to just stop talking about it and just wait till he can talk about it after the success.
Yep. And I actually have a theory, Michael, that he did it on purpose to show what happens when you do talk too much. But that's my theory. I share that I got to give credit to Cecil Lammey, a well-known Denver reporter who I actually got that theory from, but I share Cecil Lammey's theory on that. Anyway, but yep. Show me, don't tell me. Bottom line is whether he was trying to show his players what happens when you do talk too much, or whether he did just make a mistake and get slapped down. But either way, it is. I totally agree with what Michael said. Like roll out on the field and let your play do the talking is a common expression in sports, right?
There you go. So transitioning over to the famous Michelangelo. Interesting story here, right? Famous artist, famous sculptor. Right. He really used his wits there. He was called in to essentially repair this damaged sculpture. But there was a nose issue going on, wasn't there, Chris? Bit of a nose issue. Tell us about it.
Well, yeah, right, there was, and that's a good introduction to it. But was there or wasn't there is the real question.
Precisely.
Right. So just to set the stage, Michelangelo has been, he's obviously Michelangelo, right? The absolute master craftsman. This is a finished product. This is not a work in progress. This isn't a rough draft. This is a finished sculpture that he's meticulously poured his heart and soul into for God knows how long. And this patron, who is very important to him, and it's not like he's going to get caned and flogged, but if he does the wrong thing or says too much, he could have the professional equivalent of caning and flogging, right?
True.
He could lose a very important patron.
Yep.
So this is an observance of the law rather than the other one that we looked at, where he handles it the right way, right? Instead of the violation of the law that we already talked about. So Michelangelo is like, oh, you think the nose is a little bit off? And he realizes immediately that it's just the perspective and the angle of the patron who's like looking up the, nostril of the thing, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of trying to explain that to him or give some long formula and explanation about the dynamics of physics and perspective and vanishing point and a bunch of gobbledygook, he's like, okay, hold on. And he grabs his chisel and he grabs a little bit of dust that's just laying there. And he makes a show of like making a couple little tiny adjustments and dropping down the dust to make it look realistic, realizing that the guy can't. The whole point is he can't really accurately see what's going on because of his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay. Now do me a favor, just step back just a little bit and now look at it. Oh, Michelangelo is beautiful now. Yes, it's
perfection, perfecto. We love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And he didn't do anything except humor him a little bit and right. Change his perspective back to the proper viewing angle.
Right.
And
an intelligent sleight of hand, if you will.
It is a very good and a literal sleight of hand. And thinking back to that engineer, the unnamed engineer, if he had somehow managed to actually demonstrate the difference between the 5-qubit and the 7-qubit battering ram in a way that the general could have seen, it might have ended differently.
That is a good point. I would say Michelangelo is smarter than he looks, but I really don't know what Michelangelo looks like. So let's talk about the keys to power. The image here is the seesaw, essentially up and down, go the arguers, getting nowhere fast. Get off the seesaw, show them your meaning without kicking or pushing. Leave them at the top and let gravity bring them gently to the ground. That's a nice little analogy, isn't it? What did Benjamin Disraeli say? Never argue. In society, nothing must be discussed. Give only results. And that's what you guys just referenced about those Denver Broncos.
Well, we were talking a little bit of parenting and family earlier. And, we've talked in other podcasts about how you guys are like right now with kids in the house parents. Yep. I'm an empty nester, but I've been there. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. I personally am not a believer in corporal punishment. I always felt like just verbal discipline and consistency was almost always good enough. But there was one exception, and I think it demonstrates this point here.
Do you want me to show our audience the Chi Alpha sorority paddle. My dad, okay. It is hanging right over here, literally. So
I am going
to throw that in there, Chris.
I am going to tell a story about the one time I hit my son. Okay. And it's a quick story and it's a short story, but it was the one time he hit his sister. They were arguing over the remote about some TV shows, completely stupid. And he didn't hit her hard, but he was like, "Yeah, give me that," you know? And so I didn't say a word. I just punched him in the stomach, not very hard, just enough to make the point. And he was like, he sort of sputtered a little because he was shocked because I'd never done anything like that before. And the only thing I said to him was, "Did you like that?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Do you think she liked it when you hit her?" "No." "Are you going to do that again?" "No."
And that was that.
So, personal story, but I think it illustrates the point.
Hopefully you don't get any hate from other parents. Michael, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that's why you should have more than one kid.
Thank you for that. That was very well timed. Well, we have some other great examples here that we don't have to go into detail about, Chris, including Kissinger and stuff like that. Did you want to highlight any of those before we talk about the reversal?
Let's go to the reversal.
Let's go reversal. Verbal argument, here it is, has one vital use in the realm of power: to distract and cover your tracks when you are practicing deception or are caught in a lie. In such cases, it is to your advantage to argue with all the conviction you can muster. Draw the other person into argument to distract them from your deceptive move. When caught in a lie, the more emotional and certain you appear, the less likely it seems that you are lying. Boy, it's a controversial point here, huh, Chris?
Is it? I think if we're being honest, anybody who's ever had an emotional argument.
Oh, you're lying.
Significant other has done that. I mean, whether it's it doesn't even matter, right? I mean, my personal experience is as a heterosexual, but I haven't observed and I don't have any personal knowledge, but I would imagine, and I am imagining, but in any kind of close, intimate friend relationship, I think especially one where it's like a romantic type relationship. I'm talking about, like not so much like, like Michael and I are really old friends, and I don't know if I've ever really felt that. I'm not talking about like people like Michael, right? But somebody like for me, for like my wife or even old girlfriends or anything like that before I was married, I think that happens all the time if we're being honest to anybody who's ever been in a fight with somebody they care about. That's just human nature. I guess that's what this book is about. What is human nature?
It is human nature. Yep. Michael?
I was just going to say, I mean, I think the obvious reversal on this is every lawyer who's ever had to be in a courtroom. I mean, particularly defense lawyers, but probably on both sides. I mean, when you can't do it by the evidence, when you can't do it by your actions, which in that case would be proving it by the evidence, you have to do it by your argument. That there are times when, the key to power there, is the reversal, is that the only way to win is you have to do it by arguing and by doing it with your words and not doing it with your actions when the actions aren't there to back you up. When you're in a position, their example as a con man, there in the book is, that's his argument, is that, every con man who's ever been in that position,
right?
But it's really just anyone who's ever been in a lower position in a situation where you're wrong, then you argue.
That's
right.
It.
I left my underwear on the floor. I left the toilet seat up. I mean, even like whatever little things you might have done. And like Michael said, you're in the wrong, and you tend to want to like, oh, look, shiny object, know. I mean, there's a without talking about any politics or either side of the case, there's a big, maybe the biggest legal case in American history is going on right now. And like Michael just said, the defense side of that case is basically trying to do that. So,
Yep. Well, and if you're married to or living with or dealing with a narcissist or a compulsive liar, I mean, obviously they are convinced that what they're saying is the truth. So there is no shortage of conviction there from that standpoint, essentially. So Very, very interesting reversal there from Mr.
I think
Greene.
the way we can use that without just so we started off talking about, like, I mean, I guess it's certainly like, I guess it's controversial, like you said, it's edgy, it's provocative. I mean, but I you know, I was just kind of being edgy and provocative myself, you know, saying, is it? But I think if we're honest with ourselves, it happens all the time in all kinds of situations, even in slightly less emotional situations, like with a business setting. Like if you've ever been in the position of being a person who is supposed to do a report or something like that, and then you know, you have a manager or something like that, that could come up too, because the manager might call you out on something and you know you're wrong, and you know, the common human tactic would be to try and obfuscate and delay and do all that kind of stuff, right? And so I think the meaningful way that we can use that is maybe we're the manager in that situation, or maybe we're the person in the relationship who isn't in the wrong. And I think if we recognize what's going on with the other party, then maybe possibly if we don't get caught up, and I'm actually going to tease the next episode here, because we don't want to get infected, right? And we got a whole nother podcast coming up about that. But it's really easy to get infected with other people. And if we realize this dynamic that we're talking about right now, maybe, just maybe, we cannot get entangled. And that would be power. We're talking about laws of power, right? The way we keep power is by keeping our own calm, our own center, our own well-being, and not getting caught up in that thing that's going on, the obfuscation, the reversal, right?
That's right. Good point, Chris. And the only question is, are you really being honest with yourself, or are you just lying to yourself? Little sarcasm and pun intended there, guys, but that's law number 9. Win through your actions, never through your argument. And as always, make sure you go to livinglikeabank.com, like and subscribe to the podcast, check out some more educational workshops and videos that will empower you to become an epic legacy hero. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please be sure you subscribe on YouTube for the podcasts on anchor.fm, and follow me on social media at Metalpreneur. If you're ready to talk about building your own bank, use the QR code or go to rebrand.ly/buildabank. Be sure and join us for the next broadcast, as together we learn to live and operate just like the banks do.